Hello there, Sarah from 17 once again. This is my Dark Souls 2 Crown of the Old Iron King DLC walkthrough. This is the second installment, and we're going to be tackling the Fume Night in this episode. You might not think it where we are at the moment, but we're going to progress quite swiftly through this area because I know where I'm going. That's the point of a walkthrough. Or I believe that's the point of a walkthrough anyhow. So that right there is a full circle, and it's kind of a shortcut-ish. It's not the most graceful of shortcuts because it's kind of a long cut, but it gets us to this area a little bit quicker than we would if we had to go around the other area. So I guess it is a shortcut. It's just, I like the ones that are so shortcutty that you can't help but smile when you find them. You know, like the windmills and stuff in Demon Souls, where you go through 15 minutes of a level and then you hit a switch and you're right where you spawn when you die, and you just go up the little windmilly thing and boom, you're exactly where you need to be. It's just beautiful level design, and I've really appreciated that with Demon Souls because they don't have bonfires and you need those shortcuts. Now this right here is a very strange location. It has these little fat guys who are dragging their ass around, and there's also an NPC invader. The NPC invader can buff her weapon with any buff she chooses to. I've seen her do lightning, and I've seen her do poison. Also, she's got a lot of armor, she's got a lot of life, and she's going to do considerably more damage to you than you do to her, so you need to be aware of this. Fighting NPCs in Dark Souls 2 is not very fun, and it's one of those things where this was my favourite aspect of Dark Souls. So in Dark Souls 2, for them to change it the way they did, on the surface I think they made it a lot more interesting, but the more you analyse it, the more you play with it, you test it, you do your own empirical evidence, it's just worse, ultimately worse, because the AI cheats. And this is not a new thing, guys. If you're sitting here watching this, wanting to get into Souls games, and you're listening to me, hand out some of these critiques of aspects of it, don't let them put you off, dude, or dudette. It's one of those things where once you've played the game a lot, you then play it for different reasons. And one of the reasons I play is to understand all the subsystems that are at play when simple things are happening, and that when you analyse that data, that's when you come to realise a lot of the things aren't in your favour. And some games are made better by this, some games aren't. And I think because Dark Souls and the Souls games in general have a PvP component to them, it will always give us this impression that it's meant to be fair. However, it isn't, and it isn't. And it's one of those cognitive disconnects I can't get around, because to me, I always look for the disparity in a game. I always look to see what works, what doesn't work, and how it works. And sometimes the holes that you find when you look for those things can be the difference between loving and hating a game. And the NPCs on this game, to bring this little tangent full circle, are able to do things that the player can't. And I always found it kind of sad, because they're the closest thing you have to fighting another player, but they're not anything like those encounters, because they do these things that you wish you could do. And I'm not going to go into too much detail with the things that they can do, because if you've watched my live stuff, you already know these thoughts that I'm sharing, because I shared them quite aggressively in some of those commentaries. But the computer can do things that defy stamina. They can do things that defines animation priority. They cancel animations, and you can't. And one of the things I would love these games to have is a hierarchy of animations that can be cancelled. And I do apologise if you're not too sure what I mean by this. To simplify it, for the folks who aren't interested in my florid displays of wordsmithery, it'd be nice to know what animations took priority over other ones. And it'd be great if we could use those animations to our benefit to cancel recovery in certain attacks. And I think it would make both the PvE and the PvP more interesting, from a mechanical standpoint and from the players that like to get into the systems of a game. A lot of you know, just one look at my icon on my channel, my thumbnail, my avatar, whatever you want to call it, If anybody understands what that is, they know exactly what it means. It's a mark of respect. It's a mark of insanity for some people. For other people, it's not really that big of a deal. And if you don't know what it is, it's Ryu from Ninja Gaiden 2. And it's the picture that you get for beating that game on Master Ninja. And that game on Master Ninja is one of the most prolific games on the Xbox 360 because it's difficult. And there's an achievement for beating it on that difficulty that not a lot of people have because it's very difficult. And those are one of my favourite type of games. My 3 favourite type of games are action games, or character-driven action games as I like to call them. Some people call them brawlers, other people call them beat-em-ups. You know, it all depends on you know, what genre, what moniker you want to give it. I also like shmups. They're another one of my favourites, especially the Curtain Fire, the Bullet Hell, the Danmaku variant. And I like RPGs. Speaking more to the PlayStation 1 era of RPGs, where they were just crazy and awesome, and I played far too much of them. They are my 3 favourite genres of games. And all of them share something in common. They all have systems that are deep, that once you learn them, you play the game in a completely different way. And that's the kind of stuff that I look for when I play games. And don't get me wrong, not every game should have those. I don't think every game would suit it. There are certain games that simplicity is its greatest asset. But I still enjoy them when games have them. And the Soul series does have this to a large degree. But a lot of it is only touching on it rather than really embellishing on it. And I would love to see, like, if I could mod the PC version, I would, if I had the knowledge as well, which I entirely don't. I have the ambition and I have the creative aspect, I just don't have the information and the knowledge to do it. But I would make a difficulty mod for Dark Souls 2. Like, if I could do Dark Souls 1, I would probably never touch Dark Souls 2 ever again. But I'm going to use Dark Souls 2 for an example. But I would try and mod the entire game. And I would do it in a very interesting way. And it might be worth a video, actually, just to discuss the type of things I would do. Maybe I'll do it in my Backseat Gaming series that I keep speaking about, but I haven't yet shared. Oh, by the way, this guy here is essentially a smelter demon. He's a smelter demon before he became covered in ash and all, like, molten and nasty. He has some pretty predictable attacks, but he does massive damage. If you're good at fighting big opponents, you should know pretty much how to fight them. Keep close, avoid punish, bearing in mind his shoulders will ambiently spew forth lava. Alright, that I have to speak about. So, I was previously praising this enemy, and I do think he's a great enemy, but whatever that attack is then, I don't like. It just doesn't make any sense. His sword turns into a whip, or some bullshit, and does a massive sweeping horizontal attack, which, if you've ever used a whip, all of them are missing. None of them do horizontal attacks, and I mentioned, you know, to make the whips more valid, it should have more feasible horizontal slashes. And if you've ever used a whip, not everybody can do that super precise, you know, whip crack that all the pro cowboys can do. Most average whip users will generally try to swing it horizontally in a slashing motion and whip themselves. But the joys of a video game is you're not going to whip yourself because it's a game. Instead, you're going to have a nice arcing horizontal slash. And I don't know if anybody saw that video, but I had some dude arguing with realism about why that wouldn't be in the fucking game and how whips don't work that way. And it's like, dude, this is a game. There's monsters in it. You know, monsters, realism, no, it doesn't work. This is not one giant Halloween special. You know? The whip has a horizontal attack. It's the running attack, and it is the most useful move it has. Its moveset should have more of those to make it a much more valid weapon. Instead, it doesn't. And I just thought it was hilarious that there was somebody so vehemently, you know, fighting for realism. Like, what is realism in a Souls game? You know, it's just this thing. Like, to me, the argument of realism in a game is an infinite regress. It's a null subject. Because there are simulation games that strive for realism, and if you want realism, those are the games you should be playing, you know? But the whole point of games is a suspension of belief, you know? It's that willingness to put the realism and the logic aside and learn and abide by the game's rules. It's not to, you know, say it shouldn't do this because, you know, gravity, because that's just kind of silly. Yet you'd be surprised how many people will argue realism as a point, like it has some kind of validity, and it's like, what? This is bullshit, dude. You know, realism was thrown out the door the moment I sat down and picked the pad up. The realism was the sitting down and picking up the pad, because that was, you know, in real life. This is a game. And if you're going to limit what's in your game by the rules of what's outside of your game, I don't think you're thinking it through too well. In fact, you're probably making a very fucking dull game. Because games are at the most fun when they're not following the rules that we live by. You know, can you imagine if you had to sit and wait at a bus stop for 20 minutes before you could get in a game? Who the fuck would do that? Nobody wants to sit at bus stops. That's why cars, you know, were invented. That's why people buy cars, to get out of the bullshit of sitting at bus stops. Bus stops the game. Not a good seller. But this is the Fume Knight. This is a fantastic boss as well. I'm going to be using a very powerful weapon against him, and his life is going to come off real quickly. However, he's still dangerous, and you need to understand he's dangerous. He can do a mix-up of light attacks with his quick sword and slow attacks with his heavy sword. He can do a little bit of both, he can do all of one, none of the other, and he has a lot of range. It's almost the kind of range you don't really appreciate because it's deceptive. I also got caught there by his incredibly quick light attacks. That is a guard, do not attack it, do not try to break it, can't be done. This is his buff. If you prefer him in a buffed state, all you have to do is wear the helmet of the stat, wear his helmet and you will piss him off because he has a little bit of history with good old, you know, the Regis. But the difference between him now is he will not do the light attacks. Instead, he will have a buffed sword with wicked range, wicked damage, and a lot of movesets that are very reminiscent of good old Gwyn. This move right here is slower than it looks, but it is the best opportunity to punish him. Everything else is all about your understanding of how he works, your management of stamina, and your openings to attack. If you pick a bad opening, you're going to die. Apparently, according to the statistics that FromSoft have been sharing, this is the boss who's killed the most people. He has a 93% fail rate of people who fight him. That is a very high fail rate, and there's a very good reason for this, because he's very damaging, he has a ton of life, and he's surprisingly quick. But that is the boss of the DLC. All that is left to be done now is to go and reclaim our crown, and then the next video is going to be me covering some of the optional things you can do in the DLC, which I'm hoping you're going to stick forward to watching, because it's fun stuff. And you might be wondering why I got hit so much in that fight. I like imperfect walkthroughs, and by imperfect, I like to show fallibility. The biggest problem when I make these guides is it gives people this illusion that I never die, you know, that I never get hit, that I never get frustrated, and it's just not true. If you want to see a sample of that, watch any of my live playthroughs. I will fail and die just as much as any other person, but I also have the perseverance to keep trying and get better, and that's the distinction, guys. And you'd be surprised what a little patience and a lot of perseverance can get you, because you will be able to do anything you want to do, and that is the joy and the sorrow of being a gamer and playing games. Thank you very much for watching. You take care now.